All right, let's talk about something that's always been a little tricky. How do we even begin to understand texts about experiences that are, well, beyond words? We're talking about ancient mystical writings, deep spiritual insights, the kind of stuff that language just can't quite nail down. We're going to dive into a really cool new way of looking at this.
Right from the get-go, texts like this pretty much throw down a gauntlet. They tell you, hey, the words I'm using, they're just pointers. They're pointing to something that language itself can't fully capture. Whether it's the not this, not that of Vedanta or the paradoxes in Sufi poetry, it's all a big signal that we are way off the beaten path.
So, that's the big question, right? This is one of the oldest puzzles in the entire field of interpretation, what academics call hermeneutics. If a text is born from a direct, lived experience, a profound moment of insight or a spiritual awakening, how can someone who's never had that experience ever hope to get what it's really about?
To get to the bottom of this, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the traditional map people use for interpretation, show you where its major blind spot is, and then introduce a brand new tool for our compass, something called the fourth horizon.
Okay, first things first, let's look at the standard toolkit. For a long time, the way we understood texts was dominated by a map drawn up by a philosopher named Hans-Georg Gadamer. And for decades, this was pretty much the gold standard.
So this is basically the classic model. The central idea, coming from Gadamer, was this concept of a fusion of horizons. He said that for real understanding to happen, these three different worlds, the world of the author who wrote it, the world of the text itself, and the world of the reader, they all had to kind of merge together. It's a really powerful idea that shaped how people thought for a very long time.
But, and this is a big but, this map, it has a huge blind spot. And this flaw becomes glaringly obvious when you try to use it on those mystical texts we've been talking about, the ones that come from a deep, personal, life-changing experience.
Here's the heart of the problem. That old map lumps everyone who isn't the author into this one giant bucket labeled reader. But just think about that for a second. Is it casual reader just looking for a bit of personal inspiration, the same as an academic researcher who's publishing a formal analysis? Of course not. The researcher is accountable to a community, they're making a public claim to knowledge, they are playing a totally different game.
And in this analogy just nails it. It perfectly captures the massive gap we're talking about. You can read 1,000 brochures about mangoes, you can know their chemical composition, but none of that tells you a thing about the actual, direct, lived experience, the Erlebnis, as philosophers would call it, of tasting one. That's the huge difference between knowing about something and knowing it from experience.
So, to fix this blind spot, a whole new framework came along called Hermeneutics of Parallelism, or HoP for short. And what's so smart about it is that it doesn't just throw out the old map. Instead, it adds a brand new, absolutely crucial piece to our compass.
And here it is. This is the big idea, the fourth horizon. HoP argues that a researcher isn't just some other kind of reader. No, they occupy their own distinct space, their own horizon, with a very specific set of duties. Just adding this one new category completely changes how we look at the entire map of interpretation.
So what's the job description for someone in the fourth horizon? It really boils down to three key responsibilities. 1, you've got to be rigorous and ethical with the knowledge. 2, you have to actively check your own biases. And 3, and this is huge, you have to declare your position. Basically, tell everyone where you're coming from. It makes the whole process open, honest, and auditable.
Now, let's be really clear about something. The point of all this isn't to create some kind of club where only certain people are allowed to interpret these texts. Not at all. The goal is to make the distance between the person doing the interpreting and the author's original experience a visible, acknowledged part of the conversation.
This framework calls that gap the epistemic distance, and this bridge visual is just perfect. It makes you ask, how close is the researcher's own lived experience to the author's? Are we talking about a short, solid bridge? Or is it more like one of those flimsy rope bridges swinging over a massive canyon? Just admitting how big that gap is, that's the first step to a more honest interpretation.
So the big takeaway here is that this distance, this gap in direct lived experience, or Erlebnis, it's not just some minor detail you can ignore. It's a critical variable. It directly impacts the quality, the depth, and the honesty of any interpretation.
Okay, so we've got this new tool, this new point on our compass. How does it actually change things on the ground? Well, it leads to a massive shift in the kind of questions we ask in the first place.
For centuries, pretty much all of interpretation has been obsessed with this one question. What does the text mean? And we've come up with all these complex theories to try and unlock some single, objective meaning hidden in the words.
But the fourth horizon basically says, hold on, you're only looking at half the picture.
And this is the game changer. The new crucial question becomes, from what position of experience is the researcher interpreting this? Suddenly, who is doing the reading, their background, their biases, their lived experience becomes just as important as what is being read. It moves from a footnote to a headline.
And this leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. This whole idea was developed for mystical texts, but you can see how it could apply almost anywhere, right? Think about it. Does a music critic who's never played an instrument hear a performance the same way a virtuoso does? Can a sports analyst who's never been in the game truly grasp the pressure of that final play? This idea pushes us to ask in every field, how much does actually tasting the mango matter more than just reading the brochure?